Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome Director Patrick Harkins, who joins us to talk about their work on the second series of The Gold. Patrick will talk us through what it was like working on the series and the creative decisions he made to tell the story the best way possible. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Patrick. Hi, Patrick. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Rob. Nice to be here.
I'm really excited about talking about the second series of The Gold, which I didn't know was coming out for some time until they dropped the trailer, I think a few weeks before it aired, which I was really surprised that there was a second series because usually I'm quite clued up with everything, with all of this. And then I was just like, yes, I can't believe it's back. I'm really excited. How have you found the reception to the show?
It's gone down really, really well. So it's been really nice actually. I mean, yeah, an outpouring of love, let's put it that way. So it's been nice and really you never really take it for granted either. You don't know. You get so close to projects and so kind of you're in the middle of it. So it's hard to be objective. So it's really nice to get some really positive feedback, yeah.
It feels different to the first series. The first series felt like very quick, very I don't know, it felt very you couldn't even strap in. It felt like you were just like on a roller coaster going really fast all the way around. Whilst the second series feels like it allows the stories to breathe a bit more. And I feel like the first half is in reverse. It's a slower pace, but you're getting into that lifestyle of everybody and how everybody's sort of either doing really well or are trying to do better for themselves as with the gold and money. And then I think once you sort of see Ken Noy turn up, that's when you feel like the massive shift happens and it's like all hell breaks loose.
Yes. I mean, I think it's much more. First of all, you're introducing new characters, or you're catching up with people who you've only met briefly, the likes of Charlie Miller in the first series, who you met at the end of the first series. So it's setting up the new characters, and and catching up with the existing characters who we know about. So very much the cops are, their operation's been sort of downgraded. So there's three of them working from a basement in Tottenham Court Road, literally, and trying to keep the investigation open and try to justify how much money they're spending on it. So it sort of starts off there, and then really it's about the tentacles of the gold and where that takes us across the world and how they manage to launder the money offshore. Initially, through the Isle of Man, and then that takes us to the Caribbean, to the Virgin Islands, British Virgin Islands as well. So it's much more expansive, I think, and you get to spend time with each of the characters as you suggested. So I think it's got its own engine there, and obviously the police realise that there's no point in chasing the gold anymore. The gold has gone. So what they now need to chase is the proceeds of the gold, the cash. So that becomes a paper chain, and it continues in the vein of the first series, which I really loved. It's pre-digital. It's an analog investigation, and I think that's really refreshing nowadays because I think in terms of storytelling, I just think it's much more visceral and character driven, and I think sometimes we can fall into the technology taking over. And, it's just the start of the computer technology really coming in when we kick off. So I think that gives it its own pace as well, and that dictates how the police go about their business.
It's also like when you mentioned the technology thing, it made me chuckle a little bit when you see them using the telephones in the car, the mobile phones, and like the big, basically like two bricks, size of two bricks, and thinking, 30 plus years, how quickly it became to just, you can answer the phone on your watch. But then also mentioning about technology is the how analog it is, but then also how they're starting to bring technology slowly in with like the wiretapping and how they're sort of clocking on to how technology is changing and how they have to be careful in how they're doing things. But they still do certain they still talk in code. For example, in the first episode when Charlie calls up his friend and he talks about about the tea and not being served like how they served in prison with the metal cups, and it's like those little plants and stories are always something that which I
Yeah.
love that like you see those callbacks happen and you kind of in your mind as an audience you're kind of like ahead of the character, but then you're kind of on the same level as the character as well.
I think that's right. And I think there's no, if there's, I mean, the story can be quite complicated, but rest assured, if you listen and you tune in and you engage and you give it your attention, you're not going to be led up the garden path. You're going to things are going to come to fruition. Like the metal cups, which is we see very early on the conversation with Charlie talking about the metal cups when he's talking to Danny in the kitchen, and then Danny calls that back as a warning to Charlie, to say, the cops are onto you. So that that's really you need to listen, but it pays off. You're not being taken down a road that it's not going to it's not going to lead to anywhere.
The thing again as well with with TV shows and how some audience members will have be on their phone was watching it. I think again, you need those details to be paying attention, as you said, listening to. What I also noticed about season two is like the scope is a lot bigger. We're basically spanning over four continents, really. No, three even, maybe. Three. Three, sorry. And as a director, do you find that's quite daunting knowing that the scope's gotten a lot bigger for a show like this?
Yes and no. I mean, I find it exciting. I think it's exciting. To and it's true and honest as to what happened with the money and the proceeds of the gold robbery. But in practical terms, to have a bigger canvas can only be it can only excite you. You have to, if you look at the big picture, if you look at the 6 episodes, and you look at the continents and the countries, you've got Tenerife, you've got Spain, you've got the Caribbean, you've got Burma, Costa Rica, Florida, Gibraltar, as well as the UK mainland and the Isle of Man. If you look at it in those terms, then it is daunting. But I think the way you have to deal with it and the way you deal with any filmmaking is breaking it down into small chunks. So everything is manageable if you look at it in those terms. But it can overwhelm you if you think about it too much in the global sense.
Yes, and I guess as well, like as a director, because you're not shooting in order, you'll be in certain locations on certain days and filming out of order and also out of episode order as well, which probably creates it probably can be quite exciting, but then also you need to think about that this scene is going to be in episode four, for example, and then the next one we're going to do is episode two, so the character might be behaving slightly different in each scene.
Yeah. So what I do, there's a new app called Scriptation, which I work with, because even lugging around 6 scripts, so some days you can be shooting across 4 scripts, so lugging them around it just becomes problematic. You're outside, it's raining, you put them in puddles, whatever. So I use a thing called Scriptation, which I can have on the iPad, which is a digital um, script aid. So you put all the scripts in there, and then what I do then is I chart each character from start to finish in script order. So in episode one, I'll see this is what Charlie's doing, and then when I go through scene five, I will refer back to what Charlie was doing the last time we saw him, and then I'll just build up that document as we go through. So by the time you get to episode six, the dossier on where Charlie is and his journey all the way through is, massive. But that's really important because you're shooting out of order and because I need to. I mean, the cast are generally very good and they're on top of their personal journeys, the character's journey. But it's important for me to be across everything as well because I'm there essentially to help them and to take away any of that angst of what they were doing last and what they've have they met that person already and do they know this bit of information and that's all really really important and it's quite time consuming, but you've got to do it, especially in something like this when you've got 80 plus characters. across three continents and all those countries and times, time zones and everything else. You need to be on top of that, and that's a big part of my job. Because what I need to do is create an environment where they can play and where they can be these characters without the encumberment of worrying about the kind of the kind of story, the background of the story and the mechanics of it. So I just need to be there to fill them in on all of that.
So going to the app, that sounds very interesting in terms of just how you're planning in pre-prep with the characters and how they're moving along. I can't imagine if somebody didn't do that, especially when you mentioned 80 characters, how somebody could have that all in their head without having an app or having notes written down. And also helps with the continuity of the scenes and where their
Yeah,
characters are in that moment, especially when you have people who are kind of on the downward spiral as well. So for like John Palmer, because he's introducing new substances in his life, he's slowly spiraling further and further, and then you want him to be, you want the actor to be maybe at eight in one scene of the day, but then you might need him to dial it back to a two, because and it's not as bad for that scene as well.
yeah, and it can be as simple as numbering. Actually, I remember on another show there was a an actor who was descending into alcoholism, and we worked out between ourselves that the best way to deal with that was a one to I think we did a 1 to 6 of where they were at any given time, and that was a shorthand between us. But each actor will have their own needs and their own, they're all different people, so you deal with them all in different ways, and it's quite important to try and get an understanding of how people work and how much help they want or they don't want, or how much intervention from me is necessary. I mean, I'm not an interventionalist director as such. What I will do is discuss context with the actors, and that might be going back and saying, well, this is where you are and your downfall, as it were. If it was Palmer, for example, and then allow them to interpret that in a way, and then I'm there just to kind of chivvy them along or say yes and no and help them. But yeah, it's just really important to know and get a shorthand with them. And like I say, they're all different people. They're all individuals. They all have their own methodology. They've all done their homework, and they're all the best advocate of their characters because they have to justify and understand why they are behaving in the way that they are behaving, or not. So I'm just there as a sort of listening post to that, and I kind of and I've got the overall view as well because obviously sometimes what they're doing is a combination of character and it's serving the story. So I need to tread that line and make sure that the overall story is looked after as well. But understandably, each individual actor is interested in their character, and so they should be. So yeah, so that's the difference between an actor and a director.
Mm. And again, it's interesting because that everybody's prepping and everybody's aware of what they need to do, but then also just how it's going to be on the day and how, as you said, everybody's different. Um, which again is something that's quite I can imagine it's quite fun, but then difficult at the same time because if everybody's so different, you need to approach it in a different way. That's maybe one person needs arm around them, another person just comes in and does it, another person might have about 20 extra questions that you need to figure out, and how actually you haven't thought about something on that scene because they've come up with another idea, and there's all different perspectives that will help your scene and help the episodes as well. But on something like this as well, because you have a number of actors who are returning to their characters, and yourself, you're the different director compared to the first series, compared to the first series where there was two. How do you go about tackling that, knowing that people have already I don't want to say left their mark, but have already worked with these actors to create these characters. But now you've come in and you're kind of the new kid on the block. How do you go about communicating your ideas and wanting to shape the characters in a certain way for the second series?
I think that largely comes from the script. We're not treading water. We're not in the first series. We understand where the characters have been, what they've done, what they've gone through, how they've got to where they are, from the first series. And I mean, I'm not going to come in and jump all over something with jackboots. I think, I'll come in and try and understand their personal needs as performers, is what I've said. But also, the script dictates everything. So so we're on the same page in terms of the script, and then it's about being on the same page in terms of the performance as well. And like you say, these guys have shaped it, from the first series, and it's I guess it's the starting point is talking to them about what's happened in between and where they are now, because we don't go from the end of the first series and completely, it's not the next day when we come back, it's years later. So that's a good starting point, is to discuss that with them and, with the writer, Neil Forsyth, and to talk through what's happened in the interim. So that kicks you off from there. And then obviously you've got the blueprint, which is the script, which then, takes us through the rest of the series. So it's pretty straightforward in that respect, And you can't go in and try and change the character or try and change the performance, or because that's not, they've already done it and it's there. So it's about how we move forward.
Moving the characters forward. Because you mentioned about the writing as well, Neil Forsyth also wrote a book about the gold. So I can imagine he's like the fountain of knowledge on the show, with the characters and what they're doing. What are the discussions like with him and sort of pushing the story along? Because
Yeah, I mean, it's a constant dialogue between myself and Neil. Obviously, he's done all the research for years on the story in the background. He's then, worked out, and sometimes it's in conjunction with lawyers, as to who we can keep as a real character, and who, we're not able to run with, and also about sometimes amalgamating characters for the sake of the story, for the sake of the drama. So no, I speak to Neil every day about it, and every scene about it, and we present a united front to the actors. And by the time we come to shoot, we're pretty much, we know where it's all gone. We've had all the discussions, but it's an ongoing thing because it's an organic, living thing while you're doing it. And you've got all these people, all these creative people who have got legitimate input, and so they should have. And that's exciting, and that's what's exciting about filmmaking for me, is you get all these disparate people with unique, with special talents, or, for art or cinematography, or costume or whatever, as well as all the actors, and all those people are coming together to the arrow point of telling the story. And it's about wrangling all of that, and all those opinions and all that talent, and using that to get the script onto the screen in the most efficient and hopefully enjoyable way. I mean, my job is to allow people to be creative, and allow people to, contribute as much as they can to get the film on screen. Um, and that fascinates me. And obviously, I'm the director, so I'm the yes and no guy as well. And like I was, inferring with the actors, they've got their own agenda to a certain point. Their speciality is this or that, and I'm the person in the middle who, along with the showrunner, along with Neil, who is saying, yes, let's filter that and get that out there to tell the story, because that's that is all. That's what it's all about. The three rules of filmmaking are tell the story, and tell the story. And that's so important to remember.
And I think so. I do like that little ending part about the free filmmaking rules about tell the story, and tell the story. And I think as like a collective, as you have that one goal with the arrow, but then also you probably want to streamline the story as well because, as you said, m merging people together or not having enough, not have, maybe having access to characters as well, which is quite interesting as well. Which I would find interesting because you can see who might have been missed out or who you can merge everybody together and how who can be real and who could not be fake. I mean, who could be real characters and then who could be fake characters, not fake characters, but made up for the interpretation of the show. I do like the sort of conversations that you can have with one another and that what is going to be the best to tell the story and how you can take from one another and what you can do as well. Another thing that I've noticed about the show as well is that there's a lot of big speeches and monologues from characters about ways of life and sort of philosophy of life and the way the sort of good and bad and how people are sort of striving for themselves for to have better lives or to catch the bad guys. And when you're on a show like this that has such big lengthy speeches, how do you go prepping the actor for those scenes? And how do you go about yourself directing it? Because you want the essence of the character to be captured, but then also you want it to be very hard hitting and move the story along.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's all about context. It's all about where you are in the story with the character at any given time, and really, it's about them. I mean, the dialogue's good, so it's not. It doesn't feel preachy. It doesn't feel. It feels. It comes from the right place. And it comes from the right. It always comes from the right situation and context, I think. So really, it's about them. It's about the actor making those words their own and not making it feel like it's a speech. And I think it's about embracing that really. And if the characters are well drawn, which I think they are in the Gold, I think Neil has done a great job with them, and the cast are fantastically talented, then that stuff just works. And it's about, I mean, from my point of view, it's about me allowing that to happen and embracing the situation and not hiding from it and not overcomplicating the coverage or how I shoot it, moving the camera, how I do that kind of stuff, and how we edit it. Really, you just got to embrace the theatricality of it sometimes. I mean, it's like in episode 6, when Edmund Cooper comes back at the start of that out of nowhere. I mean, that's essentially like a 4-minute monologue, 5-minute monologue, and it's like a theatre piece. But we embraced the theatricality of it, with how we staged it and how we, myself and the DOP Ollie Russell, and how we lit it. In fact, we ended up going with available light there from outside. We knew it was a south-facing building, and we hoped we would get what we actually got because we couldn't afford to light it because it was high up, and there was, we would have needed like 6 cherry pickers, and we didn't have time or money to do it. So we actually just said, let's go for this and let's see what happens. And I think there's something about, I think fortune favours the brave sometimes in those situations, and I think you have to embrace the theatricality of it and not hide from it. And I think if it's well written and the dialogue is well written and the actors are shit hot, which they are in this show, then it works, and you get the combination of the insight of the character. You get a worldview, but you're also moving the story on at the same time, and that's really important. You don't want to slow anything down, but you want to feel as if the next time you're with that character, you know a little bit more about them than you did previously. And I think these this kind of writing and these speeches really help that.
Yes, and I love that you mentioned the Edmund Cooper's speech because that's probably my favorite scene of the show. And I guess as a director, because you have, as you mentioned, actors being so shit hot, it must be quite a joy sitting there watching them perform and allowing, even though it is for TV, but allowing them to have that more of a theatrical feel to it, and that's sort of more of a, I would say more like it could be like a more of a dominating performance because they're putting their worldview across, and as you said, they're pushing the story along. So you could have someone like Boyce, telling what's gonna, explaining the sort of situation, but then also stamping his authority. And then Charlie Miller talking about what he wants, um, and it. Yeah, that's one aspect that I really enjoy, and you kind of it feels like it's like call to arms as well as an audience member because you're like, yeah, you can go catch the bad guy's voice, or yeah, Charlie, use that money to for ill gains. But then also as an audience member, you're kind of like, well, maybe I shouldn't root for the bad guy.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's I think that's what's great about the show is that you do end up rooting for the bad guys sometimes, and sometimes you end up rooting for the cops, and you're conflicted, and hopefully you don't feel as if when you're with the bad guys, you don't feel as if you want to be with the cops, and when you're with the cops, you don't feel as if you want to be with the bad guys. But I mean, they're interesting characters. Somebody like Charlie Miller is a romantic. He has a romantic worldview. He states his case early on as the sun rises they hide the gold um, uh, in the mine, and he says he became a villain so that he didn't have to be a villain anymore, and to move forward, and he spends the rest of the series trying to move forward and better himself and better his life, and there's a romantic notion in that drives him. And they're not, nothing's black and white. Nobody's black and white, and it's good to get. It's good to understand what drives these people. It's not a procedural cop show. It's a character piece, and it just happens to these characters. Are attached to this amazing story as well. So hopefully it gives. It's got something for everyone, and it's a satisfying watch because of that. And like we talked about earlier, it's complex, but if you invest in it, then you'll get it back in spades, as an audience member. And there's nothing worse for me than watching a show where you know that you're being taken down a road that's never going to be paid off. And I think you can smell that, and hopefully, there isn't any of that in the goal because it's an honest story, with dishonest people.
I think as well because it's based on true events. I think you can wrap up the story, and we do get that at the end of episode 6. And I think with this kind of lead to my penultimate question is about like the glamorizing of characters because they are good versus evil in a way, and people are trying to put them better themselves, or they're just getting themselves into a deeper hole. And I think you see that with Charlie Miller's character, for example, when he's in the airport in Arizona, I think, and he meets basically a hustler and gets hustled out of money because he thinks he wants to do better and get the American dream, whilst John Palmer is kind of just digging his own grave, basically. But as a director, again, probably involves writing as well. How do you strike the right balance between glamorizing their lifestyle and what they're doing?
I think be honest and be true to the script. I mean, there's a balance. There's a balance to be struck because you need to spend time with these characters, and you need to try and understand what motivates them. And like we touched on Charlie, and I think at heart he is a romantic. Um, and somebody like Palmer, I think is he's a sort of victim of circumstance in a way because he sort of reluctantly in series one almost got involved in smelting the gold, and then he got greedy, and he saw his lifestyle escalate. There's a vanity there about Palmer. I think when we meet him at the start of series two, he's a different guy to what he was in series one because he has embraced the lifestyle, and it's kind of unlocked something in him that almost the kind of the curse of the gold for him is that it's unlocked this ego in Palmer. and this need, this avarice, this need for more of everything, whether that be, more money, a bigger lifestyle, more cars, more houses, more women. He's caught up in that, and you can see, you can chart his downfall, very clearly, his arc of downfall, very clearly, and that's, that's documented in, the things that he done, and the timeshare stuff, and also the Times Rich list, which he embraced, to be on. I mean, he could have turned his back on that, or he could have not indulged in that so much, but he couldn't because his ego wouldn't let him. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a cautionary tale as well. I mean, I don't think it glamorizes people. It shows you a lifestyle that they can, that they have achieved through ill-gotten gains. But in the end, no spoilers. Everybody gets a comeuppance, and a lot of these people are dead.
Yes, and it does. I think getting that right balance and seeing how, I guess, people's worldview and also seeing them get deeper and deeper in what they want to do is is something that's very attractive to the show. And I guess there's the human element and character element. Like we all want to get involved in what people's worldview is and people's view, and that's why I like talking to people because you can get a difference of opinion, especially when you talk about art or sport or even politics. But it's also seeing how people have lived and how maybe they've been burnt or how they want to strive to be better. And I think with the gold as well, it's like, and you see that in every aspect, and you find out more about people, and you kind of enjoy the sort of one-stream chemistry and the back and forth that they have as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's an ensemble piece, and there's some interesting people who are, thrown together. I mean, obviously, our police duo of Brightwell and Jennings are, are a great combination. I mean, they're very different people from different backgrounds, but there's a chemistry there between them, and that's fun, and and there's humour in there as well, and I think that's really important throughout. And then you get the likes of Douglas Baxter being thrown together with Charlie Miller as well. They're an unlikely couple, and also Baxter and Scott Erico, the American. So there's lots of little couples, and the interaction between them is all is fun and entertaining, as well as as well as pushing the story forward. And I think that's the dream in a way. You need that contrast, you need that propulsion, but you also need that character based, well, those relationships, and I think the characters are really well drawn, so you get a sense of how they are going to be with each other, and almost that anticipation when you're seeing Baxter and Miller together, and then going to the Caribbean, and that how that unfolds. I think the audience gets to anticipate that relationship, the development of that relationship, and enjoy it as it goes along.
Yes, and it's really enjoyable to watch. What was your favorite scene to work on?
Oh God, that's really difficult because there's a lot. It's really difficult that. I think introducing characters is nice. I think the way that we introduced Baxter and Miller, for example, the scene in the pub early on where Baxter's going to launder the money, and Miller has found out about his what he does in the Isle of Man. So he kind of befriends him, for want of a better word. So I like that, and I like the stakes in that scene where Baxter sets out who he is. We already know how dangerous Miller is, so we get to enjoy, we get to anticipate how that relationship's going to go. But I mean, it's really difficult. I don't. I mean, I like the courtroom scenes. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the dynamics of everyone in that. I enjoyed the Arizona airport scenes. I mean, the thing about Neil's writing is you get these little scenarios that are sort of standalone little films in a way, and that like the Arizona airport scene with Charlie and Alyssa, and also like the Soho bar basement with the two old gangsters as well. That's very much a kind of standalone piece. But those are fun to do. Those are fun to do because they don't belong. They don't belong, and yet they do belong, and you get to understand the context as you go along. But in terms of how we approach them, and again, we embrace the theatricality of that. We were bold with how we lit it. The basement scene, and likewise like you said, the scene at the start of H6, which where Edmund comes back. I mean that was great as well. Again, because it's got that standalone element, and it's setting up. It's contextualizing where we are in the story, and that kicks us off into H6 and how that's going to play out. It's prophetic in how he speaks about where he's at personally, but also he is foreshadowing what's going to happen to everyone else as well. So that's exciting. But no, I mean there's lots of good lots of fun scenes to do, and the secret of good writing is it's easy to shoot. It's easy to find locations for. It's easy to light. It's easy to stage. The actors find it easy to learn their lines. So that's the root of everything. And sometimes when you can't find a location or you're struggling with how to block it or whatever, it's actually the writing that's the problem. And sometimes you only find out later because you shoot it and then you end up not using it or whatever. But it sort of inspires you in a way that it just makes things clear and obvious and yeah, much, much easier to achieve.
I know I said that was my final question, but I just kind of want to follow up on what you said because so firstly, asking what your favorite scene is probably is asking who your favorite child is, which is probably super difficult, and especially when you say about that there's so many to choose from, which I know I mentioned the opening of episode 6 monologues being my favorite, but then I could probably rattle off another five for you because there's so many really good ones and interesting ones, and especially with how they push the story along, or they are little Easter eggs or plants for later on in the episodes. I think what you mentioned about the pub scene, when they're talking about the cocaine and back in the old days, that was a really good plant to find out. Actually, it felt like an Uno reverse had been played on that. Once you find out more about that scene and in that episode later on, I guess with writing. It's really hard. I wouldn't say it's. I can imagine that sometimes when you do have a bad scene, it can you can kind of be sitting there looking at your screen. How are we going to do this? How are we going to block this? How can we tell this? And as you said as well, with location work as well, like what would be the best location or best place to find for this sort of scene and how you play it out. I can imagine on the Gold because you have that mixture of different areas of locations and how you can kind of play with them as well and how for example, like the pub scene where there could be an old traditional pub and how you can look around London and find sort of perfect one.
Yeah, I mean, it's fun that there's lots and lots of locations, obviously, in the Gold, and we didn't have often what you have is what we call a precinct. So that might be a police station, it might be someone's house, the main character's house, where you can spend weeks shooting and actually getting through a lot of material in a contained environment, which really helps the schedule. We didn't have that in the Gold. I think the most we ever spent anywhere was about 3 days, and that was really unusual. So a lot of the time we were just moving. And I think a big thing for me is the way it works is it's all about the characters and it's all about moving the story forward. So it's not a traditional, let's set a scene, let's do an establishing shot and show you where we are. You don't care. You're within the room with these people, and obviously you want to see the environment. You want to, that needs to help tell the story too. But you just want the story to keep moving, and you want the characters to keep moving forward. So you're coming into rooms without giving you the context in a way of, the wider world. And that's something that's quite freeing, in a way, because you don't have to find a room with a building that's attached that you can shoot the outside of necessarily, and all that. You're just serving the story and moving it forward and pushing it forward all the time. And I think that's a real bonus of the way that Neil writes as well. It's so character driven, and you're not. It's not all about the environment to
As
the
a
same
direct,
degree. Sometimes it's.
sorry, um,
To the same degree that it often is.
do you find though as a director as well that you could be quite exciting knowing that you'll be working at different locations rather than say shooting in the same place for 3, 4 weeks?
Yes, I mean I have I've occasionally turned stuff down because I knew it was going to be in the same place for 8 weeks or something. I've just thought I don't want to do that. I'm not that interested in the material that will sustain me, to be in that place for that amount of time. I think it's exciting. I think it keeps, I mean, because of the size of the cast and the amount of locations, every day was like a revolving door. You were seeing new faces all the time, and then you were seeing them maybe 4 weeks later or 5 weeks later and somewhere else. So it just kept everything really fresh and energized, and it keeps the crew energized as well, because I think if you are in one place for a long time, it's quite hard sometimes to keep that energy up and keep everyone engaged to the level that you would like them to be. It's just human nature. People relax, and they become a little bit kind of used to the surroundings. And I think we were very much like a band on tour, if you like. Every day was a new location, and I think that's exciting, and it's got new challenges, and you don't feel as if you're doing the same thing day in day out, which you can do if you're in a precinct.
That's quite interesting with that, and also getting the right balance that it's not just you, but it's also the crew as well, and being in that area, and the space. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I come from a crew background. I was a prop man for 10 years before I started directing. So, I grew up working on low budget British films that would be termed art house films now, films with like Terence Davis and Mike Leigh and Derek Jarman and Danny Boyle, these guys. So I understand crews, I think, and hopefully I I know how to engage people and bring them along with you, because I've seen it happen in a really good way, and I've seen it not happen, and that can only be detrimental to the show. Everyone gives up so much of their time, and it becomes a very all-consuming job to be involved in, profession, whatever, vocation, whatever you want to call it. So it's important that people are, having a good time as well. And I don't mean, necessarily laughing and joking all the time, but there is a bit of that, but that people are, feeling like they're part of the show and that they're contributing, because then you're going to get much more out of them, and then you're going to get a better product at the end of it. So it's a win-win for everyone.
and again, I think that's probably the best way to end the episode. Patrick, thank you so much for your time today. Gold season 2 streaming now on BBC iPlayer. Go out and watch Patrick and the whole crew's work. Thank you again, Patrick.
Thank you, Robert. Really nice to meet you. Good luck with your next one too.
Thank you very much. You take care and
All
bye
right.
bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.